Hello, are we on?
Yeah, I think, Simi, we're good to go.
Okay, hello and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are calling from. My name is Simi Nwogugu. I'm the CEO of Junior Achievement Africa, an organization that empowers young people to be able to succeed successfully in the global economy and have successful futures. We have with us today Pierre, who is our board member and is also a partner at Oliver Wyman Consulting. And I'm proud to introduce him. Pierre Romagny is the partner who has worked with us on this survey that we're launching today. And he's worked with his team, both with JA Africa and JA Injas, that's our MENA region, Middle East and North Africa JA, to study the gaps perceived by youth and perceived by employers that are missing in our workforce, particularly along with the youth. What kind of skills are they missing, and how can we build those skills to bridge the gap? We heard from employers and we heard from the youth, and Pierre will tell us exactly what were the insights from that survey. And we hope to have a conversation just about his perceptions from the survey, and also what you as an individual, either as an employer or as a young person looking for work, what are the things that you can do to better prepare yourself for employment or for employing young people. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Pierre, would you like to just introduce yourself for a minute before we get into the conversation?
Sure. So I'm very happy to be here and have this chat and debate with all of you today. I'm sure it will be quite interesting. So as Simi said, I mean, we've worked on the report for a couple of months with many youth and employers participating across regions. So that's been very exciting to see the level of engagement. So as Simi said, I mean, my name is Pierre. I'm a partner with Oliver Wyman. I work across the African continent, and I've been doing so for the past 18 years as a consultant now, but I've been a banker in the past, and in further back, I've been working for multilateral donor organizations on the continent. And this report obviously wasn't, required quite a big team. So I was supported by Malebo, who's part of our Johannesburg office as well, to kind of lead and craft a report with the support of Simi's team across the continent and across Middle East and North Africa.
Okay, thank you very much. And before I start and go into the survey, I just want to give context to what Junior Achievement Africa does, and to explain why we were interested in the survey. So JA prepares young people, typically within the ages 10 to 29, but more and more we tend to focus on secondary school and post-secondary school youth with skills to succeed in the future workforce. And we also work with private sector firms and public sector governments across 13 countries in Africa to work with them to prepare them for the future. And this is particularly exciting to me because it actually will inform the strategy that we're doing currently on what are the things that we need to do to actually make ourselves more effective. And so, Pierre, what I'd like to ask you is, what are some of the takeaways? Just share with us the insights from this survey, the participants. I'd like to actually really thank the 350 employers across sub-Saharan Africa that took part in the survey. And I'd like to thank the over 2,000 young people that took part in the survey. But Pierre, please, can you just share the survey highlights with us before we get into Q&A? Thank you.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So I'll just kind of share a few telling statistics. I think there's obviously many more in the report. So I'll just share my screen quickly. Right, so we've kind of structured the report in four broad sections in line with all the questions we've been asking employers and youth over the past couple of months. So the first one is around sectoral opportunities and challenges, and then moving on to qualifying the skills gap, and then bridging the gap, and then finally the impact of COVID-19. So in terms of the first pillar of the report, there's about 1 out of 3 youth that aspire to be an entrepreneur and self-employed in the short term. So that's quite a high number. And we've asked the same questions, some of the same questions in 2020. And there's quite an increase in the number of youth that aspire to be entrepreneurs and self-employed in 2021. About 48% of all youth are attracted to the tech industry. Unsurprisingly, given the global trends these days around tech. And about 70% of youth in sub-Saharan Africa will need to overcome the lack of relevant work experience if they are to secure employment in either the public or private sector. So work experience is indeed a big topic of focus. And employers think that the lack of required skill set prevents youth from working in the private sector. We'll come back to this point, I'm sure, in the discussion. In terms of qualifying the skills gap, digital and behavioral skills gap are the widest in sub-Saharan Africa labor market, as observed by the employers. 41% of youth find it difficult to acquire a digital skill, ranging from basic computer skills and IT literacy to advanced tech, data, and coding skills. So really across the full range of IT skills. And interestingly, the majority of employers and youth believe that technology has the potential to create jobs across regional markets. However, due to the digital skills gap in the market, organizations tend to shy away from adopting new technology. On bridging the gap, 70% of youth strongly believe that they require upskilling and updated education in order to become and remain relevant in the market. So that's a very strong majority of youth here. And 50% of employers believe that internship and learnship provide the best preparation for the workplace. And again, I'm sure we'll debate some of these findings later in the discussion. And then on the looking at the impact of COVID-19, I mean, here a lot of expected findings where over 60% of employers have experienced increased difficulty in creating jobs since the COVID-19 pandemic started about 18 to 24 months ago. And 50% of youth have experienced increased difficulty in finding employment since the outbreak of COVID-19. So again, I mean, two fairly unsurprising statistics here on COVID-19. So I'll pause here. It's a lot to take in, I'm sure. There's quite a few bulky statistics here, but probably a good place to kind of kick off the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, the tech part of it. And I was wondering, the impact of COVID-19, which you just discussed. Do you think that if we had done the survey a year ago, 2 years ago, before COVID-19, do you think the results would have been the same? Or do you think that COVID-19 has sort of impacted the results in one way or the other, especially with regard to technology?
Yeah, that's a good question. And no easy answer, but I think broadly, yes, COVID-19 surely exacerbated the push on tech and the need to, or the employers seeking more tech skills or digital skills in the employees. But I think if we take ourselves, remove COVID-19 completely from the equation, I'm not sure the results would have been terribly different, right? I mean, we live in a very global world, completely connected world these days. We've all heard and seen the trends and the impact of digital in our daily lives, pretty much wherever we live in the world. So definitely, I mean, the results would not have been far off what they are today with COVID-19.
Mhm. And having conducted this survey, would you say that there is a significant difference or significant disconnect between youth perceptions and employer perceptions, or are they mostly in agreement with a few differences? What did you, especially with your focus group interviews?
Yeah, look, great question. I think this is also the essence of why we did the report, right? We really wanted to, I mean, as in the past, we kind of looked at youth perception. Here, we really wanted to connect the youth perception with the employer perceptions and understand, you know, beyond all the gaps in the market, if there's also kind of a disconnect between youth and employers. I think broadly, mostly aligned, but one that really came out strongly in the responses is around the expectation of what youth needs to enter the youth market, right? So I think from an employer perspective, what they really brought forward was a lack of IT skills and behavioral skills for youth as being the biggest barrier to entry or the biggest challenge to entry in the labor market. And that came out quite strongly in both the survey and all the focus groups we ran with many employers. I think from a youth perspective, what came across very strongly as their perception of what makes it difficult to enter the market is their lack of experience, right? So the way they see it is, well, you know, I might have some skills and all of the above, but I'm just lacking the experience, and employers just want experience for me to enter the market. And I think, so this is a disconnect. I won't say it's a massive disconnect because somehow I think there's definitely a link between what we've heard on behavioral skills and work experience. Right? Yes. And very often those two tie together, where employers have called out things like resilience, professional EQ, attitude, empathy, etc., lacking sometimes from young employees or jobs. And these skills typically are mostly acquired through working, right? I mean, it's not textbook stuff. It's not, you know, you can tell, you know, youth about all these skills in a classroom, but I mean, you just need to do it, right? I don't think any of us who have been working for a number of years had all these skills when we started out. No way. So,
So it's like a chicken and egg, where the employers are saying they don't have the behaviors and the work experience, whereas the work experience is what will actually help you develop the behavior. So for us at JA, I think that's a key learning for us, that we have to create more opportunities in our programming for young people to actually experience the workforce. So note to self, develop more internships and job shadows for young people to actually understand the workforce with that and gain work experience in a non-threatening way. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So, you know, I think it was 2016 or 2017, I had the privilege of hearing a former World Bank president on a panel, and I asked him a question: what keeps you up at night? And he said, and this is not verbatim, I'm trying to remember exactly, but he said, the increasing automation of jobs, which renders millions of young people out of work because now machines can do what they used to do. The increasing gap in digital knowledge and skills between youth in developed and developing countries, which leads to increasing gaps in income and poverty levels. And for him, one of the troubling aspects of that is that more young people in developing countries actually have access to the internet, and so they can see information about their peers in other parts of the world and what they're earning. And so it's not just an increasing gap in income and poverty levels, but they actually know that there's one thing for it to exist, but there's another thing for them to know that it exists. And so he saw this as a ticking time bomb. What is your, I mean, based on this survey and generally from your work, what is your recommendation for solving this problem? Sorry to, you know, put you as a World Bank president for a day.
Yeah. No, look, it's a great question, right? And obviously there is no silver bullet. But I mean, if we kind of split the question into there's one topic around automation and its impact on employment in Africa, and then there's the skills gap around technology more broadly, right? And it also its impact on employment or unemployment. And I think on the first one, on automation, I mean, this has been a topic that's been on the table for more than a decade now, right? With all those new technologies saying, well, are we going to, replace thousands of jobs in given companies with tech because of machine learning and everything else? And as we stand today, I think the conclusion is, I mean, sure, technology has been implemented quite widely in most organizations, or most medium to large scale organizations. Hasn't necessarily removed many jobs or any jobs at all, right? So I think from a large company perspective, what they're struggling with is, well, on one hand, we need to apply technology to improve the client experience that we have. And in certain areas, it removes some jobs, but it doesn't remove employment. So they have massive reskilling programs where they know they need less people in parts of the organization, but they need a lot more in others, right? And especially in all the client-facing interactions. I mean, this is not going to be replaced by machines, and clients have made it pretty clear that they don't want to talk to machines. So we're seeing some trends stabilize and some anxiety also reduce a bit in terms of the impact of technology. I think reskilling obviously hasn't worked out for everyone, right? Depending where you are in kind of the pyramid of the organization, etc. But broadly, it will balance itself out more or less. Plus, with technology comes many new technological jobs that you need to manage the tech, which doesn't manage itself. So I think versus 10 years ago, now there's slightly less talk about tech will take all of our jobs. It's tech will take some jobs, but there's a lot of other types of jobs, tech or non-tech, that will be created. And there's another question as to, are we creating jobs fast enough anyway, right? Which we know the answer to, and this is another topic altogether. And then there's your question around the gaps, the tech skills gap. And it is definitely, and back to your first question, right? It's COVID, no COVID, it's definitely having an impact on what we expect from the labor force, for sure, or what we see as being expected from the labor force. I think what would keep me up at night today is not the ability of anyone to acquire those skills as individuals. It is the access to tech to acquire those skills, right? And I think if we compare between regions, I think the reality is that in Europe, there is quite an easy access to technology. I think across the African continent, we're not there, right? Far from it. And there's a lot of inequality still in terms of the access to technology, which therefore means there's a huge disparity in terms of basic IT literacy among youth and among the adult population as well, right? So it's purely access to a machine, access to a connection, and then once you have this access to somebody who can guide you through the motions, right? And in some instances, this falls back on the employers to do, right? Give you access to the machine and educate you, and it doesn't necessarily always come prior to, getting employed.
So given that, I mean, is there any advice you have? We have, all our school networks watching this. Is there any advice you have for schools on how to prepare young people to bridge this gap? Is there any advice you have, particularly secondary schools and universities who are preparing young people to go into the workforce? Is there any advice you have for governments and private sector companies? How can they support these efforts to bridge these gaps?
That's another good question. Look, I think first, it's obviously in everybody's best interest to try and bridge these gaps, right? Because employers are looking for the most skilled and experienced labor as possible, and youth is looking to just get into the labor market, right? And it also benefits governments because all of this will create value for the economy. Look, I think as we've debated this a bit in the focus groups, we both employers, but also all the teams running work readiness programs. And I think it's really down to the basics to, one, understand where the demand lies so that both governments and civil society and employers can guide youth towards the right skills development. So what are we looking for in terms of skills, but also where? So what are the sectors, right? And we've seen differences between markets and between regions in terms of what those key sectors of the industry are in terms of what you should be aiming for. But it's also really making the connections between private sector, education institutions, and civil society to really try and create those work experience opportunities. And they also do not have to be extreme work opportunities where you say, it's an internship of like 3 to 4 months and I'm going to do the job that somebody does in the company, etc. I mean, it's really about acquiring these first-hand of experience to really start maturing those behavioral skills that we mentioned earlier, right? So stuff like job shadowing, right? And that's one that employers are often very open about because it's a very low-hanging fruit and doesn't require any investment from their part. So it's like, I open my doors for a few days or a week and I get youth in and they just shadow somebody doing some work, right? And it just gives a lot of perspective in terms of, wow, okay, beyond the exact skills that those guys have to apply to perform these activities, there's also the whole life and mindset you need to thrive in any company. And that's really a kind of first experience. So it can be as simple as kind of just shadowing or short work experiences to like proper work placement / internships are a lot more formal. But I think employers, have been fairly open to all of this. Some of them have institutionalized programs to skill youth and provide internship opportunities. Some others have not. But I think all of the employees we spoke to were very open to it. So they need a bit of a push, they need a bit of hand-holding, and they need a platform to do that. And then from the government perspective, it's about making sure these work experiences are not abused. We have seen in markets that have been running these programs for decades now, it's become very institutionalized, and employers have had the tendency to abuse of these programs to say, well, it's either unpaid work or very cheap labor, and I'm going to get a ton of interns
free labor
work, and it's just gone too far the other way, right? So I think where government have a role to play to say, well, once that's picked up, and facilitate the picking up, but once it's picked up, to make sure it is there is some kind of regulation so you don't abuse of this initiative.
So I think, just to summarize some of what you said, everyone has a responsibility in this, in bridging these gaps. The workforce, the employers, they have the responsibility of preparing not internships only, but even smaller chunks of time that secondary school students or university students can come in for a few weeks. Schools have the opportunity to equip their young people. I mean, there's a saying that someone said recently that said, you know, the former structure of the teacher being a sage on stage is gone and really should be a guide by the side where the students actually are empowered to do some of their own learning and the teacher just facilitates that learning, because that's preparing them for those skills that will be useful at work. If they're able to do some critical thinking, some research, some analysis, come to their own conclusions, because in a lot of our African countries, we're still fed information in schools. The teacher brings in the notes, you copy the notes, you cram the notes, you regurgitate at exam time. And that's really not preparing young people for the world of work, where they actually have to, you know, find the answers, develop the solutions, present it to their boss and things like that. So the more the school can reflect that kind of environment where the students are empowered to do their own learning and the teacher just basically guides and makes sure that, you know, there are no mistakes, that prepares them for some of those soft skills, the critical thinking, the design thinking, problem solving, those kinds of skills. And then the responsibility of government making accessibility more in each country, making it easier to be able to access the internet, making sure especially our public schools are wired because a lot of the students don't have access to smartphones and things. So there's responsibility along that line and then also regulating employers to ensure that they're not overusing the free labor. One of the things from my experience that also helps is a 1-week program we do for recent university graduates called the Venture in Management program, where we actually get them for a week to, you know, experience entrepreneurship, financial management, all the skills that they need when they become managers. And then we do a job fair afterwards where we link them to different companies. And just that 1-week experience really prepares these young people. I remember one of the employers who has employed from VIM practically every year over the past few years, said to us that, you know, we actually have VIM graduates who go into our fast track graduate trainee. And typically for those, we don't take, this is in Nigeria, we don't take Nigerian graduates. We take people who have gone to school abroad and come back because they have all these skills and they're able to, you know, thrive in the rigor of the management training program. I mean, we'll take university graduates from Nigeria in our entry level, but this particular one, you have to be able to think on your feet, be proactive. And because of that 1-week immersion, they're able to take 3 students out of 25 that go into this program straight from VIM. And it's because they've been given this opportunity to solve problems, to think for themselves, for 1 week. So imagine if we're able to do that for the 4 years of university, or, you know, it would actually result in better employment. Okay, so which leads me to my next question. There are about 12 million jobs, 12 million candidates chasing 3 million jobs. I've heard that in Africa, that there are 3 million jobs available at any given point for entry-level candidates, and there are about 12 million young Africans looking for jobs. So no matter how much we prepare them with skills for the workforce, there just aren't enough jobs. So what advice do you have for young people in taking the initiative to actually empower themselves to be able to thrive in a situation where they're having to compete for very limited number of jobs?
Yeah, it's
sorry for the hard questions.
Yeah, no, but these are exactly the questions that, you know, everybody needs to apply their minds on to try and solve, right? These are the right things to try and solve. And look, I think as everything else with statistics, right? It's we kind of need to look under the first layer because you know, we want to make sure we're solving for the right thing. And when we talk about this ratio of like 3 million jobs versus 12 million job seekers essentially every year, I mean, we're very much focusing on private sector and formal sector, right? And I think these statistics is also what's driving the fact that 1 out of 3 young individuals in Africa wants to be an entrepreneur, because it's
the only way.
It's a huge effort and a huge challenge to go and seek a formal employment in the private sector, and the odds are typically not with you, right? If not against you, and you're like, well, I might as well just try my luck at setting up my own business and being self-employed. And in a lot of instances, this falls back into the informal sector as well, right? Having said that, the informal sector also has employment opportunities. They might not always be number one on list of preferences, but sometimes they just are, because the informal sector is still like 90 plus of any economy's volume, right? And this is not Africa, this is everywhere in the world, right? And so how you kind of tackle all these challenges, and I think it comes back to what youth wants to do, but I think youth, and this is nothing recent, right? But youth needs to align their preferences with the market demand for one. I think that's quite key. But to be able to do that, you need to know what the market demand is, and there's a big information gap that we've seen on most markets, and so there's a lot of basics to fix, right? To really start addressing the challenge. So one is going to be information gap in terms of where are the opportunities and how can I best align myself to fit within these opportunities. And then the one that the report addresses or looks into is the skills gap, right? So irrespective of which industry, what are the core skills that will not make me, not give me a competitive advantage, but just level myself with basic expectations
across the world
have, right? And we've covered those. And at least from the feedback we got from the survey, these are about behavioral skills and IT skills. And when we talk about IT skills, it's not about advanced IT skills, coding, and all the fancy stuff. It's about basic IT literacy in most cases, right? And when we talk about basic IT literacy, it's not just about how you use Word or internet. It's also, in today's world, because of COVID, it's also how you interact through a screen, right? Because a lot of the jobs now are just being done from home through a screen.
Interviews are being done online,
and we all know it's tough. We all had to learn the hard way 18 months back, right? And because of all this experience, youth also has the opportunity to learn faster, right? But now basic IT literacy skills have evolved to be more than just using the tools on your computer, essentially. Sorry, it's a long-winded answer.
No, that's
answer the question totally, but it's kind of step by step. What are some of the bricks that we can lay on that wall to just know?
And one other thing that IT helps you do is not limit you within the walls of your country or continents. There's this digital nomads now, where you can be in your living room in Nairobi and you are developing websites for people in Norway or Oslo. So it broadens your job markets, basically, if you have these digital skills. And so you're not limited to the 3 million job opportunities. Okay, we are more than halfway. So I want to go to the questions in the Q&A box. Yay, we have, viewers from Nigeria, Ghana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Kenya. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I see so many questions. Okay, let me try and read some of these questions. So we have a question from Team Teddy. apart from counseling, what measures do the organization also put in place to see youth grow and become financially stable? So in your experience as Oliver Wyman, what case studies have you seen where companies have really succeeded in helping their young people grow and become successful? What kind of measures have they put in place to help entry-level young people succeed?
So I'll answer that based on what we've seen in the group discussion and the survey. I think this question also might have been targeted at Junior Children Africa. So maybe you can also give your views in terms of what the organization is doing there. But from an employee perspective, I think let's call it the good news, slightly unsurprising, but I think the vast majority of employers have training programs for youth and beyond youth, right? So across individuals' career to ensure they get onboarded properly, that they get the right level of basic skills across tech, but across a number of things depending on the company. And they have regular, so I think the majority of companies also have regular programs to upskill their employees on a regular basis based on trends in the industry, right? So the list is very long to cover, but obviously there is some around tech skills, but is very often going to be industry specific.
Okay, so I mean, I think you gave a great answer, so I'll just take the next question and answer that, which is from Yakubu Aliyu. Between work experience and behavioral skills, which should be prioritized? So based on my experience, I don't think you should think about which should be prioritized. I think you should think about which one, how can I get a bit of both? And again, what we said before, it's not either or. So you don't say, oh, should I prioritize work experience or should I prioritize behavioral skills? You can actually do both together because as we mentioned earlier, when you get the work experience, you also get the behavioral skills because while you are doing the job as an intern or as a volunteer, you are learning how to become more professional in your attitudes. You're learning how to be professional in speaking with your colleagues, in writing letters or emails. It's really, for me, disappointing when I see emails from young people who, with lots of typos, errors, and very colloquial language, like they're speaking to me as if we're friends. And even if we are friends, if this is, an application for a job, you should still sound professional on the email. And so my response to you, to the young person who posed that question, is for you to figure out if you're not able to get employment because you keep getting these answers that you don't have work experience, find out how you can volunteer. Just approach a company and say, you know what, I have these skills, I'd like to hone them, I'd like to volunteer with you for a month. And in that month, you watch and learn how people behave, you get the work experience for your CV, and you also gain the behavioral skills. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive, is a short answer. And so you shouldn't be thinking about prioritizing, but thinking about how to get both. Okay, so question 3 is from Victoria. Oh, it's a long question. I actually don't see the question.
I think I've had time to read it, Simi. So I think it's mostly common to say, job instability is not born out of the COVID crisis, and we know that. I think it's been worsened by COVID, and we've all seen that over the past year or two. And I think Victoria, warns against employers using internships as a means of acquiring cheap labor. So as much as it is a great initiative to push the acquisition of experience and then enter the labor force, it shouldn't be used in times of crisis by employers to say, well, I had to lay off a lot of people because I just can't afford it anymore, but I've just employed a bunch of them as interns. And it goes back to my point around, all great initiatives can have a dark side, and we've seen that dark side in some very advanced economies, and so there's a lot of lessons to be learned from there. And this is where public sector and government can play a referee role to make sure that all these initiatives are benefiting everyone and not just one single party.
Okay, thank you. That's actually quite helpful. Thank you. I agree. So Min Hawi said, similar to what I just said, that African education system is theory-based and not practical-based. So schools, teachers that are on here and listening, I hope that you are learning how to make some edits to the way that you teach. It says that, Min here says that it creates job seekers rather than job creators. So we need to rethink the value creation in terms of our education system. I totally agree with you, Min. And, one initiative we are working on at JA is supporting the governments that we work with in how do we incorporate junior achievement, entrepreneurship development programs and career skills into the national curriculum so that more young people can get the experiential learning that junior achievement provides, because we really believe in learning by doing. And so the more young people who have access to these programs, the more people we have who are job ready when they graduate school. So thank you for that, Min. We have another long comment from Chennai, which I'm going to read. I think it's about the informal economy. Chennai says, I like all these initiatives we speak of and find them extremely helpful. But I'm just wondering if we might have an issue in terms of economies like Zimbabwe. So shout out there to you, Phil, where the economy is highly informal. Even if we do all these activities, we only absorb a few people in formal workspaces, but many more enter or are found in the informal workspaces. So I guess then the issue or the burden falls back on schooling institutions and curriculum, maybe upskilling programs for out of school youth. What are some thoughts around this? So I'll let you take that one, Pierre.
Thank you so much, Simi. Look, I think it's a great comment. And, the informal sector is going to be, is and will remain the biggest employer on the African continent for years to come or decades to come, right? And I think it's the reality. It's not necessarily a positive thing, especially from capturing the value created by the economy, especially for government from a tax perspective, but it is still a reality. And I think everything that all of the above, everything that we've discussed so far in terms of what employers are looking in their employees, etc. I think if all of it applies to the formal sector, most of it, if not all of it, again, will apply to the informal sector as well. I mean, it's going back to kind of what really differentiates the formal versus the informal sectors, right? And at the end of the day, we can debate this for hours, but one key criteria will be, is my business formally registered and am I paying taxes, right? And if I am, therefore I am in the formal sector, right? It's like one of the tick box stuff that we can do to check who's formal and informal. Now, in terms of the nature of the business, sometimes it isn't a huge amount of difference, right? You have a lot of very small business that can be in the formal sector, right? Size matters, but not always. So I think a lot of what we talked about will apply to the informal sector. Now, getting those initiatives in place in the informal sector will have another level of challenge. That's for sure, right? And no one should be naive about it. So the task at hand for the educational institutions and work readiness programs, for example, to try and bridge the gap or connect youth with employers, will be somewhat easier in the private sector than in the informal sector, because in the formal sector you have that mapping, you have more control over it, and you have somehow better access remotely, right? You don't need to go and knock on all the doors. You pick up the phone, send an email, etc. Informal sector is going to be another challenge. And I think while thinking about how to drive those initiatives, there needs to be a different level of effort, but also probably a different approach, whether you do it in the formal or the informal sector.
Yeah, and I think that it's also on the government to try to, the reason why they're thriving informal sectors in these countries is because of the burden it takes to become a formal business. So I think just investing in reducing the bureaucratic measures of registering a business, of paying your taxes, of doing all of that. If you crash it, you'll see that a lot of these informal businesses will become formal businesses. If they can go online and register in 5 minutes with the Corporate Affairs Commission and become a formally legalized business, if they're able to open a bank account without huge restrictions, they'll have an account. So we've seen in countries like Nigeria, for example, when the telecom sector was decentralized and people had phones, we saw a spike in businesses. We see a spike in fintech investments because people see that, okay, now with phones, a lot of people can do a lot of transactions over the phone. And so they're finding that fintech businesses are getting big private equity investments because they are making it easier for the small and medium-sized businesses to actually be able to get paid, because they don't have to go get like a big bank account. They just have to have a Paystack account. They just have to have a Flutterwave account. So if there's a way that governments can make these things less bureaucratic, really support the fintechs and all, you will find that a lot of these businesses, they don't desire to be informal. It's just that's the way they're able to do business, because they might spend 3 years chasing a certificate from government to make them legal to operate, and they don't have time for that. So they'll, probably. So these are some of the things that governments in Africa also need to consider, because then you're going to increase the number of people paying taxes. What do you think about that?
No, I completely agree. And I think making the access to the formal sector easier is also a huge step in opening access to funding for a lot of companies, right? And I'm not saying anything that no one already knows, but to grow your company, you're going to have to, at some stage, you're going to need access to funding or equity, or the two, right? And then if you're not formal, you're not going to get that from any formal financial institutions, right? And so this is also what unlocks employment, right? You need all businesses to grow, small, medium, and large, to be able to create employment. And those businesses to grow fast, not over 10 years with reinvesting their own profits, you need debt or equity. And if you're not formal, you're not going to get much of that, or you're going to get that in the informal sector at a cost that might sink you under. So there's a life cycle, right? There's a life cycle, and that's why the government can ease the fluidity. By easing the access into the formal sector.
All right, so we have 10 minutes left, and I want to end on a positive note, because we've been talking about all the problems that schools need to fix, and government needs to fix, and youth need to fix. In your opinion, after doing this survey, what inspired you? What positive things did you see in the survey about youth in Africa, and about employment in Africa? What are the things that inspired you that, oh, okay, there's some positive things here? Hopefully there were some.
No, there were many. There were many. I'm just trying to get my thoughts in order, because so I think from a youth perspective, what struck me in the responses of youth is, one, the engagement, right, and willingness to kind of share their views, etc. And I think the other one, based on the responses, is really this willingness to take things into their own hands, right, in terms of the future. And I think that came across more strongly through, a third of youth want to become an entrepreneur and self-employed, saying, I mean, I'm willing, I think I've got the skills, I've got the energy, I've got the vision, and I'm going to do this, right? And if I can't get a job somewhere, I'm going to do this myself. And I think this is quite telling of the resilience and the energy of youth on the continent. And we see it every day on the continent. It comes across in the numbers very clearly. So I think on a very positive note, I think this is great. This is, this has been the case always, and spectacular to see that even in times of crisis, etc., there is that resilience and willingness to just do it. So that's really fantastic. And I think from an employer perspective, again, the level of engagement has been fantastic across, Sub-Saharan Africa and Middle East and North Africa. I mean, we hadn't planned on getting so many responses from employers, and we got 350 plus, right, and highly engaged. We run some focus groups, and we had to run more to make room for everybody that really wanted to kind of have a say and share their thoughts.
Fantastic.
Because and what that tells me and us who run the survey is, and employers really care, right? It's not just like, I only care that I find the people that I'm looking for right now to drive my business. They care because they understand that everything is very well connected, right? You can't be successful alone, and youth is your best asset for the future. That's it. That's it, right? There's hardly any debate on this. And so you need to make sure that youth is ready to take on all the things you're going to throw at them, right, in the workspace. And they want to call this out. And they also want to help, right? They also want to help to say, well, if we can play a role in upskilling those behavioral skills, providing, opening our doors for some experience, etc. I mean, we will do it to the best of our capabilities and abilities. So I think the 300 that we spoke to, they're very keen, and the millions of others are most certainly quite keen. But all of this needs to be coordinated, facilitated, and supported by all the parties that we see today. But yeah, I think it was extremely positive, right? There's an empathy and a concern that goes beyond their own business.
Okay. And I again want to thank all the 350 employers who participated in this. I agree with Pierre that it just shows that you do care about the young people and getting them the right skills. And Pierre, I want to thank you for partnering with us on this. I think that this really has shaped our future as JA Africa in what kinds of jobs we want to do to empower youth to succeed in future. I think we're really taking away from it the need to have a more structured internship program. I mean, we kind of do one now, but it's more on an as-needed basis. But we do need to do more of that on a structured basis. So thank you for helping us shape that. And I wanted to ask you, do you have any particular last comments before we go for our viewers?
No, look, I think my views on youth and employers were about it. Again, thank you very much for partnering, for allowing us to partner with you to run these studies, and I think they great insights into and great glimpse into some of the challenges, but mostly the opportunities going forward, right? To really reduce the gap and reduce the unemployment across the continent. And I really hope that all those insights will create some sense of direction and purpose for a lot of the players, whether it's the private sector, public sector, the government, the civil society, in really working together to close all these gaps that we've seen.
Right. Thank you very much. And, I'm really grateful that you are on our board and you're going to be helping us to shape our programs, coming out of this survey. And I want to speak to all the schools and educators listening. You've heard it from here. You've heard it from all the comments in the comment section. Young people want schools that align with the current reality. So really to have a more experiential learning. They want to learn by doing. They want to, gain those critical skills, the critical reasoning, analytical reasoning. So we are ready to help you at JA Africa. If you would like us to bring our programs to your school, all our programs are all experiential programs. We have digital skills programs. We have financial literacy skills program. We have work readiness skills programs. And so this is my own little plug. ja-africa.org. Go there and figure out how we can come into your schools. All our programs are free to schools. And so we do implore the private companies listening to support us in going to schools in your countries so that more schools and more young people will have access to experiential learning programs. I would like to thank everyone at Oliver Wyman who worked on this. I know it took a lot of work, and we're going to make this study available on our website. It can be downloaded, and we appreciate any feedback you have as you read it and you want to share your comments. And again, I would also I know this study was done with JA Injas or JA MENA, the Middle East and North African. So I'd like to thank AKEF, my co-CEO, who's CEO at the Injas Arab, for letting us join in on this study because it has really helped us out. And I'd like to thank finally all the members of JA Africa staff that also supported this work. And I'd like to thank you all for tuning in today to be part of this conversation. Please do drop a line, let us know if this was useful for you and what other ways that we can be of help. Thank you again, Pierre, and see you at the next committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Senanu.